Like they like I could see him moving. Like I don't know how I didn't hit him with the mirror of the truck. I don't know how, and I don't know how he was that tall.
So, once again, you found yourself at the campsite of the Orator. Please pull up a chair. As you can see, my fire is stoked, which means today I have 2 tales to tell. But before I begin, if you do find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then please like this video, but also subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell. When you click the bell, you'll get notified every single time I upload new content, but when you subscribe, it helps me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, all of my tales are first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So, if you or anybody you know has a story that might be fitting on my channel, please reach out in the comments below or on any of my social medias. We'll find a time to get together, and hopefully one day I can feature you here on The Orator. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get on to today's first story. It is a tale that I call The Trucker. So, it's the fall of 2013. Ben is about 28 years old, and he lives in the mid-Michigan area. And he's recently taken on a new job in the trucking industry. And his job this time is to drive a truck that transports dairy products. And so basically, he shows up at the job site. He loads his truck up with whatever products he needs for the day. And then he stops at each site. Some are grocery stores, some are convenience stores. And he delivers their dairy products and puts them in their relegated slot, and then he slowly makes his way back. Now, his truck, it's not one of these big 18-wheelers. It's like a 6-speed box truck, but the back is meant to be cold. So it's pretty big still, but it's not one of these massive 18-wheel truck kind of things. And so his job is show up at the first site around 1:30 in the morning, so very, very early in the morning. And then what they do is they drive to their furthest site away and deliver there first, and then they slowly make their way back to where they started, and they hit every single store along the way. So he starts in Bay City, Michigan, which is where the plant itself is, and he shows up, and he makes sure that his truck is loaded, and he has pretty much the same route every time, which is he travels from Bay City all the way down southbound I-75 to Flint, and then he slowly makes his way from Flint back north to Bay City. And so he loads up his truck around 1:30, and he's on the road around like 2:30 a.m., and he should be hitting his first site around maybe like 4:35 a.m. So he's really the very first person to be in the store and to make sure everything is stocked for the dairy sections before pretty much anybody else gets there. Naturally, that means that he's driving on the road at like 2:33 a.m., and it's completely empty. There's nobody else on the road pretty much ever when he's driving. And so he loads up his truck, and he starts to head southbound I-75. Now, if you've ever been on I-75, especially in Michigan, pretty much there's always going to be construction at some point in your journey. It's a major expressway, and Michigan is just known for its construction, and so it is what it is. And so Ben hops in his truck, and he heads southbound I-75. And the first part of his journey is really smooth. He's in the far right lane, like trucks are supposed to be, and his maximum speed in the truck is only 60 miles per hour, but the road itself is relatively smooth, and like I said, there's nobody else really on the road, and so it's a really easy drive. As he gets further south and really closer to Flint, all of a sudden, construction is there. Now, he's used to this because he travels this route quite often, and the construction itself is nothing big. They're actually dealing with kind of the median of the road, and they're looking to add extra lanes. And so northbound and southbound, the actual lanes themselves aren't really that effective. There's just a lot of cones up right now, so he kind of has to pay attention to them. And so he's driving along southbound. The cones are on his left, on the far left side towards the median, and there is one car behind him, and it's also staying behind him, kind of going 60 miles per hour, which is a little bit weird because obviously I-75, you're allowed to go 70 in Michigan, and so it's a little strange that somebody's staying behind him and not passing him and going faster, but he's not really worried about it because he's on the job and, you know, he's got his orders. And so he's clocking along 60 miles per hour on I-75 south, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a person that's walking into the road. And Ben kind of looks at this person, and a few things are immediately clear. Number one, this person's really tall because the truck sits pretty high, right? It's not like a normal truck. It's a box truck, and so he's up almost like in an 18-wheeler, and there's this giant mirror that juts out, and that mirror sits like 6.5 feet, 7 feet tall, and this person is at least as tall as the mirror, if not a little bit taller. The second thing Ben notices is that this person didn't like come running out of the median or anything like that. He just was suddenly in the road walking towards his truck. And Ben turns and gets a good look at this person. He's wearing a brown knit, kind of one of those hats to keep you warm in the winter. And then on the front of that hat is a square emblem that he can't quite make out because it's like a split second that he sees him. And he's got this giant, like, lumberjack type beard, and he's wearing a plaid shirt. And, other than his appearance, the only thing Ben can think is, this dude is going to get clipped by my mirror and it's just going to be the end, right? And this guy walks right next to his truck, like literally eye level with Ben, who's, like I said, like 6.5, 7 feet up in the air sitting in this truck. And somehow, nothing happens. It's as if the mirror literally phases through this guy, but the guy doesn't stop at his truck. He literally just keeps walking. And so Ben, obviously he looks at his rearview mirror and he just sees this guy sort of disappear into the side of his truck, and he's just gone. And so Ben, he's smoking a cigarette, which is, his normal MO in the morning. He's got his coffee, he's smoking a cigarette, and he literally drops the cigarette, fumbles his coffee, his hat falls off his head, he swerves his truck a little bit, he slows down, obviously, to try to figure out what's happened, and then in a couple seconds, he, has to regain himself. He's on the road, he can't get into an accident, and so he regains speed, and he tries to calm himself down. He's trying to figure out what the heck happened, and then all of a sudden, that car that was behind him speeds up and flies around him at about 100 miles an hour, and it's a state trooper. And the guy doesn't put his lights on. It's clear he's not going to arrest anybody or anything like that. It's almost like he saw something too and just wanted to get out of there. And so, Ben, he's freaking out. His heart rate is really high. He's scared, obviously, at what he's just seen. This person is nowhere to be found, and it looks like the state trooper saw what he also saw, and he can't make sense of any of it. But at the end of the day, he's kind of got a job to do, right? So he continues to head down 75. He makes it to the Hill Road exit, which is his exit. He exits, and he goes to the 7-Eleven, which was his first delivery spot. And, he's trying to calm himself down. He's unloading the truck, and he's kind of going through the motions and everything like that. And the lady that is at the counter, kind of manning the store, they've obviously struck up a ton of conversations over the months of him working there and stuff like that. They have sort of a working relationship. And so she just asks, like, hey, something seems wrong. You okay? And he kind of explains, I was on the road and this really weird thing happened and I really can't explain it. And, I don't believe in that kind of stuff, but I just don't know what happened. He was there clear as day. And, he's telling the lady this story and she says, what's weird is I've been working here a long time. I get a lot of people in the store. She said, that particular spot is like a hotbed of activity. She's like, I've had people come in here all the time and they always say they see weird stuff, people walking around or things they can't explain. She's like, so, this isn't some sort of isolated incident for you. Something weird is with that particular spot of I-75 because that stuff happens all the time there. And so to this day, Ben, he doesn't really know what to do about the situation. There's really nothing else he can do. He continued on that route for years, never saw anything else again, but it's just one of those incidents. It happened to him. It freaked him out. He can't possibly explain it. And it seems like there was at least one other witness to what happened there. That's going to do it for our first tale. Again, all of my tales are first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you or someone you know has a story like that might fit on this channel, please reach out in the comments below. I'll also post my social medias, and you can reach out to me there, and we will hopefully find time to collect your story. Now, on to our second tale. This is a story I call The Hound. It's the summer of 2010, and Bill and Rachel are really excited because they are building their first big home. And Bill, he's kind of a carpenter by trade, and so he is literally building his own house, their own house, from the ground up. and they're actually living on the property of that house in one of these gigantic tents. Now, this tent is one of these giant tarpaulin tents, and it's staked down all the way around, and so there's no way to get in other than the main entrance, which you have to unstake to even get into the tent. And then the inside of the tent, it's big enough to have, a place to have a generator, and they have a tiny little cook pot place in there, and they have their bed and everything, and so they're living relatively comfortably while he builds his house. And Bill, not only does he do carpentry because it's a passion of his, but he also does it sort of as his job. And so by day, he kind of works in that trade where he goes and he fixes up houses and does repairs and things like that, sort of freelance work in that area. And then by night, he comes home and he works on the house in the evenings. And so this is a routine they've been doing for months as he's slowly getting closer and closer to finishing their home. And he takes on this job where he goes to this house. The people aren't living there, but it needs to basically be renovated to make it livable again. And so his wife, she stays at home in the tent home that they have, and he goes over to this house, and he's been working on it. Now, a little bit of backstory about Bill and Rachel. They're both spiritually pretty sensitive. They have a lot of history with spirits and ghosts and energies and feelings and stuff like that. And so they're pretty used to running into this kind of stuff and dealing with it. And so when Bill accepted the contract on this house, before he did, when he went into that house, he immediately sensed there was some really bad energy in that house. But it was something he was comfortable with because he'd been dealing with that kind of stuff his entire life. And so right away he knew there was weird stuff going on, but he was like, this is a job, and frankly, we need the money. We are a little bit, behind on things, and we're building the house, and so money is kind of tight as it is. And so he really couldn't turn down the job. Now, another thing that kind of plays a little bit of a role here is that a week prior, Bill was doing some work, and he accidentally sliced off the tip of his finger, and it was bad enough that there was literally bone exposed. So this wasn't some little cut. This was like a deep wound. But again, they don't really have insurance, they're low on money, and so part of the reason Bill is taking this job is because he needs to have enough money so when they go to the doctor, he can actually get this repaired and they can pay for it. And so, he's starting to put money away for that. He does have an appointment, scheduled for the surgery to take place, but it's a little ways out. And so he's thinking, yes, I'm injured, but I've been doing this trade for a really long time, and I feel comfortable doing everything that I need to do in this house, even with this injury, and it's properly bandaged while I do it. And frankly, I can't turn it down anyway because money is too tight. And so he goes to this house, and for a couple weeks, he's working on the house. Every single day he goes in, he does his job, he leaves. But while he's there, all sorts of the normal paranormal activity stuff that you'd expect happens. He sees lights flickering on and off, even though he knows that the electric workings of the house are correct because he's the one who repaired and made sure that they were correct. He sees doors opening and closing, shadows in the corners of his vision, all sorts of different things like that. Hot and cold flashes, just basically everything you'd normally experience in something that's a paranormal house. He experienced that stuff, but he's comfortable with that. He's been around it his entire life. It doesn't really bother him, and he knows that if he doesn't feed energy into it, then hopefully it'll just leave him alone and pay him kind of the same courtesy. And so he pretty much finishes the job, and it's done, and it's his last night there. And he is ready to wrap everything up and head out and be completely done with this job. And so he finishes everything. He's kind of looking around, making sure he's got all of his tools and all the lights are turned off. And he's kind of going through the house and making sure everything's good. And just as he's ready to exit the house, there's this long hallway off to the right before you exit the door. And as he's walking by that hallway, he notices something at the end of the hallway. And he kind of turns and takes a look at it. And there is this massive black dog staring at the end of the hallway. And I'm not talking like a normal, typical giant dog that you'd think of. This dog is so big, he literally could have taken his head and put it in this thing's mouth. It's that big. It's gigantic. And he sees it, and this is something a lot more than what he's experienced the entire time he's been there. He hasn't seen any physical manifestations of anything, let alone something this gigantic and ferocious. And so he sees it, but he knows, again, if I don't give it energy and I leave it alone, hopefully it'll pay me the same kindness. And so he opens up the door, he takes a step out the door, and he turns around and looks back into the house, and he says, "You are not welcome to follow me. I'm done here. I'm just going away, and you're not welcome to come with me or enter my home or anything like that." And then he closes the door, he goes to his truck, and he heads home. He gets home, he tells his wife that it was just a totally normal day and that he's done there, and he doesn't even mention the dog or anything like that at all. One, because he just doesn't want to stress her out or anything like that, and two, because he said, don't follow me, and he expects that the entire ordeal is over. And so they enjoy, kind of their normal evening. They eat dinner, they hang out together, he goes and works on his house and everything like that. Everything is totally normal, and then they go to sleep. Middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, all of a sudden, Bill gets woken up by his wife screaming and his little dog barking. They have this little kind of yippy dog that is not going to fight anything, but it's sort of there to alert them in case anything goes wrong. And so he, immediately gets up and he gets out of bed and he still doesn't know what's going on. He's still rubbing the sleep from his eyes. And so he, rubs the sleep from his eyes, he adjusts and he looks, and there it is. The giant black dog that he saw back in the house has somehow followed him. And as he's staring at it, he's realizing that the entire tent is still sealed off. This thing somehow entered the tent, but the entrance is still sealed and staked down. All of the corners are staked down. He takes a look at it, and so he's looking at this thing, and he's kind of like ready to square off against it, but obviously it's like this thing is gigantic. He doesn't have a hope of actually fighting this thing, but his only thought process is, I have to protect my wife. I cannot let this thing attack my wife. And so he, yells at it, "Hey, get out of here. I told you to leave." And this dog takes a step towards him, and it's growling and snarling. He sees its gigantic teeth, and he takes a step towards it, thinking maybe I can kind of scare it away, and hopefully, then it will just vacate, and I don't have to do anything about this. It'll leave on its own. And so he takes a step towards it, and I said, "Get out!" And this dog takes a step towards him and is becoming more aggressive. And he realizes, you know what? I'm probably not going to be okay when I do this, but I can't just let this thing do something to my wife. And we're literally trapped in here. You can't get out of the tent except through the entrance with this thing is standing in front of him. And so he literally takes a step forward and swings a giant punch at this dog's face. And as he does it, it literally passes through the dog, and the dog disappears. And he's just standing there looking around, and there's nothing there, and his dog is still freaking out, yipping on the bed, and his wife is looking around, freaking out. But all of a sudden, the energy is gone, the dog is gone, and the tent is totally silent other than this dog, his little dog yipping and stuff like that. And so he's looking around, he's breathing heavy, he's freaking out because he thought, I'm going to punch this thing, and whatever it is going to just eat me. He didn't even know what it was. He's like, this thing is so dark and evil and giant. I'm not sure if this is a normal spirit or if this is a hellhound or if this is just a demon or what this thing is. But he thought, if I attack it, this is probably the last thing I'm ever going to do. And now all of a sudden, that adrenaline high is there, but the thing is just totally gone. And so he's breathing heavy, and he turns towards his wife and said, "What did you see?" And she basically explains, I saw this gigantic black dog. It was bigger than anything I've ever seen before. And so, she confirms that it's the exact same thing he saw back in the house. He says, "All right, well, let me tell you what happened." And so he kind of goes through the iteration of what actually happened in the house and how he tried to leave that energy behind and stuff like that. And he's like, I told it to stay, and I don't know how it even followed me home. And so they kind of have a conversation about it. And then after that, the thing just was gone. He kept working on his house. He took on new jobs and stuff like that. But luckily, whatever he did, that aggression that he exerted towards it was enough to get that thing to leave. And they have thankfully never seen that spirit again. And so that's going to do it for today's stories. If you enjoyed these stories, this kind of content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then please like this video, but then subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell. Click that bell so that you can get notified when I upload new content, and then subscribe so I can continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. And finally, all of my tales are first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you or anybody you know has a great story that could be featured on my channel one day, please reach out in the comments below or any of my social medias. Email me, anything like that. Try to get a hold of me. We will find a time to sit down. I'll collect your story, and then one day we will feature you here on The Orator. And so that's going to do it for today. Until next time, where you'll pull up a chair, my fire will be stoked, and I will have another tale to tell.